The stars outside Arlen Voss's small medical vessel blinked cold and distant. He had been drifting for hours, barely conscious, repairing minor damage from the skirmish that had thrown his ship off course. His ship's systems were failing, oxygen was running low, and the galactic maps no longer matched what he saw through the viewport. He was tired. He wanted only to sleep. Then came the sound, a broken, trembling cry over the comms. At first he thought it was static, another glitch from the damaged systems. But it was too organized, too desperate. Arlen squinted at the signal console. It pulsed weakly, a pattern that didn't match any known life form or distress code he had ever seen. He frowned and leaned closer. He could almost hear the words. "Please, don't hurt us, Mommy." The voice was soft, almost childlike, yet it carried a fear that chilled him to the bone. Arlen froze. Dragons. That word flashed in his mind, even though he had never expected to hear it live. Dragons were thought extinct. Dangerous. Legends. The galaxy treated them as monsters. And yet, here was a sound that could only come from something small, trembling, and terrified. Arlen activated the ship's scanners, moving slowly so as not to lose the signal. The readings came back strange and almost impossible. 3 small creatures, their bodies barely larger than a human toddler, huddled inside a hidden cavern in a nearby asteroid. They glowed faintly, their scales shimmering like molten gold in the dim light of the ship's sensors. The cave itself seemed natural, yet carved with strange marks, signs of care, perhaps, or a long-forgotten civilization. "They are alive," Arlen whispered to himself. "And they're hurt." A sudden shudder ran through his ship. The asteroid field was not as empty as it appeared. He adjusted his course, keeping a careful distance from the rocks. He could see faint movements, shadows of something massive outside hunting. Someone, or something, was closing in. The babies were not safe, not yet. Arlen docked his vessel against a small opening on the asteroid, careful not to trigger alarms or attract attention. He readied his suit and medical supplies, knowing he had almost nothing left to help with. As he entered the cavern, a strange warmth spread through him. Despite the fear in the air, despite the danger, the babies were huddled together, trembling. Their tiny wings shook, their eyes wide and shining. "Please, help Mommy, she is hurt," one of the small dragons whispered. The words were broken, almost human in form. It made Arlen's heart pound. He had never heard dragons speak. In the corner of the cavern lay a massive figure, wounded, scales cracked and bleeding from plasma harpoons. This was the mother, Sarinthra. Her breaths were shallow, her massive chest rising and falling with effort. The babies pressed against her, their cries muffled by fear and sorrow. Arlen could see deep pain in their eyes. The mother's life was slipping away. Every second counted. He knelt carefully, scanning Sarinthra with his portable medical device. He had no protocol for dragon healing, there was no such thing, but instinct told him to act. He treated the wounds as best he could, using his last remaining supplies. The babies watched him nervously, their small claws gripping at each other and the mother. Their trust was fragile. "Do not be afraid," Arlen said softly. "I won't hurt you. I only want to help." One of the babies moved closer, brushing against his glove. Its scales were warm, soft under his touch. The creature shivered, but not from fear this time. It was alive. He could save them. If he could just hold the cavern until he figured out a plan. Outside, faint energy signatures approached. Hunter ships. They were close, scanning, looking for anything alive. A warning flashed through Arlen's mind. Helping dragons was forbidden. He could be killed, branded as a criminal by the Galactic Council. The baby's cries pierced through the warnings, sharper than any threat. The decision seemed impossible, yet clear. "I can't leave them," he muttered. "Not like this." He activated a shield around the cavern entrance, not enough to repel a full attack but enough to buy minutes. He turned back to the babies. "I need you to stay calm," he said. "Mommy will be okay. I will help her. I promise." The smallest dragon curled against his leg, and for the first time, Arlen saw a faint flicker of hope. He began to work with everything he had left, stitching torn scales, cleaning burns, stabilizing breathing. Time stretched thin, each second like an hour. Every sound from outside made the babies flinch. Every flicker of light from his scanner sent the mother twitching. But slowly, very slowly, Sarinthra's breathing steadied. The color returned to her scales, a dull shimmer growing brighter. The babies whispered in relief, small cries of joy and fear mingled together. Arlen smiled faintly, though he was exhausted. He had no time to rest. The hunters were still outside, waiting, calculating. He looked down at the babies, their eyes filled with trust, innocence and fear. And for the first time in his life, Arlen felt a purpose greater than survival. The galaxy might call them monsters, might want them dead, but here, in this cold, dark asteroid, they were living, they were family, and he would do whatever it took to protect them. The stars blinked outside, indifferent, cold, and distant. But inside the cavern, warmth and life lingered. And a human, small and fragile, became the guardian of a story that the galaxy would not forget. Arlen whispered to the babies once more, "We'll make it, somehow, together." And for the first time, the cries that had reached him were no longer only fear, they carried hope. Arlen Voss worked quickly, his hands moving over Cerinthra's wounds as the small dragons huddled close, watching every motion. The mother's breathing was heavy, uneven, each gasp sounding like a battle against death. The cavern was quiet except for the hum of Arlen's portable medical devices and the occasional whimper from the babies. Outside, faint lights glimmered against the asteroid walls. Arlen knew what they were. He had read the reports, memorized every warning. The hunters, elite dragon hunters, were feared across the galaxy. They were precise, relentless, and without mercy. Any human caught aiding a dragon would face immediate execution by the Galactic Council. The thought pressed against his mind, sharp and heavy. But looking at the small dragon's terrified faces, he could not care. He checked the mother's pulse. It was weak but steady. The plasma harpoons had pierced deep, leaving burns that no ordinary medicine could fully heal. He had only his emergency kits, a few doses of stimulants, and his knowledge. He adjusted the bandages, hoping the bleeding had slowed enough. The mother's golden eyes opened slightly, and she studied him with a wary intelligence that made Arlen's heart tighten. "You're safe," he whispered. "I won't hurt you." The baby dragons cooed softly, brushing against him. Their trust was fragile but growing. One of the babies, slightly larger than the others, tried to speak. "Please, don't let them take us, don't let them kill Mommy." Arlen swallowed hard. The words hit harder than any blaster shot. These were not monsters. They were innocent, helpless, and facing extinction at the hands of others who claimed to protect the galaxy. He looked around the cavern for a place to hide them better, but the asteroid offered little cover. Any ship that scanned this sector would see the life readings immediately. A sudden tremor ran through the cavern. Outside, the hunters' ships had moved closer, scanning for signs of life. Arlen felt the cold fear settle in his stomach, but he pushed it aside. He had done worse in battle, but nothing like this. Nothing where the lives depended entirely on him and no one else would help. He activated the ship's small shield generator, routing it through the asteroid's natural rock to hide energy signatures. It was weak, enough only to blur the life readings for a short time. The hunters would not stay forever, but it might give them minutes, maybe an hour. Arlen had to work fast. The babies watched him, their tiny bodies pressed to their mother. "Mommy, Mommy," they whispered. Their voices broke his heart. He carefully moved one aside, letting him check the mother's wounds more closely. The plasma burns glowed faintly red, like the touch of fire on living metal. Arlen applied salves that could accelerate cellular repair, then carefully stitched the worst gashes. The mother flinched at every motion but did not resist. She trusted him at least enough to let him work. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time was hard to measure in the quiet tension. Every shadow, every shift in the cave made the babies tremble. Their small wings fluttered as if they wanted to fly, to escape, but they were too young. Arlen murmured words of comfort, soft and steady. His own fear was hidden behind calm hands and focused eyes. Then the cavern shook violently. A beam of energy struck near the entrance, sending rocks skittering. The hunters had found the asteroid. Their ships hovered just outside the scanning range, probes moving closer, analyzing life signs. Arlen felt his chest tighten. There was no way he could fight them off. His vessel could not fire from here. Even his shields would not hold long against their plasma cannons. He looked down at the babies. Their eyes were wide with terror. One of them cried out and the sound pierced him. He had to make a choice. Stay hidden and risk their death, or act and risk his own life. There was only one thing he knew he could not do: leave them. Arlen activated his emergency communication channel, broadcasting a low-level signal across the sector. "These lives are under human protection," he said calmly, though inside his heart pounded. "Do not attack. Any harm to them will be met with retaliation." It was a bluff. The hunters could not hear him yet, not clearly, but if they traced the source they would know someone was claiming responsibility. Still, he had to try. The babies clung closer, and he saw a flicker of hope in their frightened eyes. The mother stirred, her eyes opening fully now. She studied Arlen and then the caves around her. He could see recognition in her gaze, recognition that this human was different, that he meant no harm. He nodded to her slowly and she lowered her head, accepting his care. He worked faster, stabilizing her breathing, applying more salves, making sure the wounds would not reopen. Sweat ran down his face inside the suit. His hands ached, but he did not stop. Every motion was careful, every word gentle. The baby's small claws brushed his gloves, their warmth giving him strength. Outside, faint shadows shifted again. The hunters were probing, trying to detect the life forms. Arlen's shield generator buzzed, overloading slightly under the strain, but holding. He prayed silently, something he rarely did, hoping this fragile technology could buy them enough time. Sarinthra gave a low, rumbling sound, almost like a purr, but not comforted. It was a sound of awareness, of warning. Arlen understood. She was capable of defending herself and her babies, but she was wounded. She needed him to finish this first. Hours, or maybe less, passed. Slowly, Sarinthra's breathing grew steadier. The color in her scales returned, faintly shimmering in the dim light of the cave. The babies whispered softly, their fear easing. Arlen looked around at them, the hunters outside, and felt a resolve harden inside him. The galaxy had rules. The council had laws. The hunters had guns. But here, in this hidden asteroid, life mattered more than rules, more than fear. He would protect them no matter the cost. He leaned back against the cave wall for a brief moment, his arms sore, his mind racing. "We have to keep moving," he whispered to the babies. "We cannot stay here. But we will survive. Together." The stars outside were cold, distant, and uncaring. But inside the cavern, the warmth of life pulsed. Arlen had made a choice, and for the first time in a long while, he felt hope. The enemy was near, but the bonds he had formed with the mother and her babies were stronger than any fear. The cries that had reached him so urgently at first were now softer, filled with trust. And for the first time, Arlen realized that the galaxy might not be ready for dragons, but he would make sure they had a chance to live. He whispered one last time before beginning to plan their escape. "I will not let them die. Not while I live." The cavern shook again, harder this time. Outside, the hum of energy weapons and the faint thrum of ships closing in filled the asteroid with tension. Arlen Voss could feel the vibrations through the floor beneath him. The hunters had found them, no doubt about it. His shields could hold for only a few minutes longer. Every second counted. He looked at Sarinthra, her golden scales dull under the dim light but breathing steadily now. The mother dragon was alive because of him, but she was still weak. The baby dragons pressed against her, trembling and whispering broken words of fear. Their eyes were wide and full of trust he could not betray. He knew that protecting them would likely cost him his life. Arlen's mind raced. His ship was too far to escape quickly, and his weapons were minimal. The hunters were skilled, merciless, and numerous. They would not stop until the dragons were dead. And yet, leaving them would be worse than death. His hands shook slightly as he checked the last of his medical supplies. He had nothing more to heal them further. He glanced around the cavern, looking for an idea, anything that could give them a chance. Then it came to him, the ship's experimental reactor. It had a prototype healing field, designed to accelerate recovery in extreme cases. Normally it was illegal, unstable, and dangerous. Using it in the asteroid could destroy the vessel. But it might save the mother dragon, and that meant saving her babies too. Arlen took a deep breath and activated the reactor. The low hum of energy filled the cavern. Lights flickered as the machine began to charge. The warmth it emitted brushed against the baby's scales, and they nuzzled closer to Sarinthra. The mother's eyes widened in surprise, then softened as the healing energy seeped into her wounds. The effect was immediate. The burns from the harpoons began to fade, and her breathing steadied. Her golden scales shimmered brighter than before, glinting even in the faint light of the asteroid. The babies cooed softly, their trembling lessening. Arlen allowed himself a small smile. It worked. She would live. Then the cavern door shook violently. The hunters had breached the asteroid's outer defenses. Probes and energy beams scanned for life. They had traced the faint signals from Arlen's ship. Any moment now they could enter the cavern. Arlen made the decision. He would stay between the hunters and the dragons. If he moved or tried to escape, the mother and her babies might be killed. He positioned himself near the entrance, adjusting the shield to cover the widest angle. Every muscle in his body tensed as he prepared to face the impossible. The hunters' voices came over the comms, cold and mechanical. "We know someone is here. Surrender the dragons or be destroyed." Arlen did not answer. Words would not matter. His hands hovered over the reactor controls. The machine's energy was already dangerous, but he increased the output, directing it fully into the cavern. The air shimmered around them as the healing field intensified. Sparks flew along the reactor console. He could feel it overheating, warning alarms screaming in his mind. Outside, a bright pulse of light indicated the hunters were preparing to fire. Arlen gritted his teeth and pressed forward. He had to finish the treatment. The mother dragon's wounds were almost fully closed, but she needed the last push. He adjusted the field manually, feeling the strain as circuits overloaded. Sweat ran down his face, mixing with dirt and grime. He did not look away from Sarinthra. The mother stirred. She lowered her massive head toward him, eyes filled with understanding and gratitude. The babies chirped softly, brushing against his legs. Arlen felt a surge of resolve. He would not fail them. He could not. A sudden explosion rocked the asteroid's outer wall. Rocks rained down and the cavern trembled. The hunters had fired. The shield held just enough to protect them, but Arlen knew it would not last. Every second now counted more than ever. He pushed himself harder, redirecting power from non-essential systems to the healing field. The lights flickered wildly, and the hum of energy became a roar. Sparks flew across the control panels. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the reactor could tear the asteroid apart. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, Sarinthra's wounds were completely healed. Her breathing was steady, strong, and full of life. The babies cooed and chirped, flapping their small wings in relief. Arlen allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. He had done it. They were alive. But the cost became clear instantly. The reactor, pushed beyond safe limits, began to overload violently. Warning lights flashed red. The cavern shook again, stronger than before. Arlen realized that the asteroid would not hold much longer. He had saved the dragons, but now his own life was at extreme risk. He looked at the babies and the mother. Sarinthra nudged them gently, a silent command to move. The small dragons pressed against her side, and she looked at him with deep, intelligent eyes. It was a silent thank you and an understanding of what he had done. Arlen made one last decision. He would stay with the reactor as it overloaded, keeping the shield up as long as possible to protect them while they escaped. His body shook from exhaustion, fear, and strain, but he did not falter. The cavern filled with a bright, warm glow as the reactor went beyond limits. Sparks flew like fireflies and the air hummed with energy. Outside, the hunters hesitated. They had never seen anything like this. The human was risking his life to protect dragons, creatures considered dangerous, expendable, and extinct. And then the blast came. It was not a fiery explosion but a wave of energy that sent rocks and dust flying. Arlen's body tensed as the reactor gave its final pulse. The cavern shook violently, but the shield held long enough for Sarinthra and the babies to leap toward a safe exit Arlen had prepared. He felt himself thrown back as the final energy pulse surged. Pain ripped through him and darkness crept at the edges of his vision. He watched the dragons escape, their small wings flapping, guided by the mother. He could not move, could not follow. But he smiled faintly, knowing they would live. The hunters fled, confused and afraid. No one had ever seen a human act like this. No one had ever claimed dragons as something worth saving. And in that moment, a legend began, one that the galaxy would not forget. Arlen Voss, human, medic, and guardian, had made a choice that could never be undone. He had risked everything for life that was not his own. And even as darkness closed in, he knew it was the right choice. Sarinthra and her babies flew through the dark space between asteroids, their wings shimmering faintly in the starlight. The warm energy from the reactor still pulsed in their veins, keeping them strong and alive. The cavern behind them had collapsed, the asteroid now a shattered shell, and Arlen Voss had not followed. She did not understand fully what had happened to him, only that he had given them a chance to live. The baby dragons chirped nervously, pressing against their mother. Is he gone?" the smallest whispered. Sarinthra nudged them gently, a low hum vibrating through the air. She did not speak like humans did, but the meaning was clear. The human had saved them, and now it was their turn to survive and remember. Sarinthra took them to a hidden pocket of space near an uncharted moon, a place where hunters rarely ventured. She and the baby settled into a quiet, safe orbit. She studied them carefully, making sure they were unharmed. Their bodies were small, fragile, but alive. She had survived because of him. They would survive because he had acted. Across the galaxy, the Council received reports of unusual energy readings. Ships had detected the blast near the asteroid belt, and life signs dragons had been recorded where none were supposed to exist. Investigators traced the signals, finding fragments of the event: the small human vessel, the strange energy pulses, and the dragon family. They did not expect the truth. A week later, dragon envoys appeared at the Galactic Council chambers for the first time in living memory. Massive, graceful, and intelligent, the dragons moved with quiet authority. They brought recordings from the asteroid, the glowing cavern, the wounded mother, the terrified babies, and the human who had saved them. The council watched in silence, disbelief, and growing tension. The footage showed Arlen tending the dragons, speaking softly, ignoring the warnings, the law, the hunters. It showed him risking everything for creatures the galaxy had labeled dangerous, extinct, and expendable. The images were impossible to argue with. The dragons had survived because of him. Sarinthra stepped forward, her massive wings folding neatly against her back. She lowered her head, tilting it toward the council, as if showing them the truth they refused to see. The babies chirped softly behind her. For the first time in centuries, dragons had a voice in the council. And through them, the story of a human's mercy spread. One of the council leaders, a stern alien with cold eyes, spoke first. This is impossible. No human would dare act in such a way. It violates every law. It violates protocol. A young dragon stepped forward beside Sarinthra. This human violated your laws to save life. Not for reward. Not for gain. Only because it was right. The chamber was silent. Murmurs passed between council members. Some looked uneasy, others angry. But the evidence was undeniable. The dragons lived. The human had acted. And in doing so, he had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten. Life was more important than rules, more important than fear, more important than conquest. The council attempted to argue. But dragons are dangerous. They can destroy worlds. Sarinthra's voice, calm but firm, resonated in the chamber. We were hunted because we refused to rule through fear. The humans proved we are not monsters. One life, saved by mercy, changes more than armies ever could. Whispers ran through the council chamber. The humans' actions had not only saved dragons, but they had rewritten the story of the galaxy. Generations of fear and lies were being challenged. One human, fragile and small, had stood for life, and the galaxy was beginning to see the truth. Back near the uncharted moon, Sarinthra taught the babies what had happened. He saved us, she said, using their limited human words. We owe him. We will never forget. We will protect life like he did. The babies chirped softly, eyes wide, understanding the weight of what had happened. The dragons sent messages across star systems. Stories of Arlen Voss spread like wildfire. He became a symbol not of humans' weakness but of their strength, the courage to act when it was easiest to do nothing. Pilots, explorers, and even council members whispered his name, teaching their children and crews about a human who chose mercy over fear, life over law. Sarinthra and her babies began to patrol the edges of the galaxy, helping humans, warning of dangers, and quietly ensuring life was protected wherever they went. The council, forced to acknowledge the truth, revised laws about dragons, hunting, and life forms once considered threats. It was a slow process, but it had begun. The galaxy had learned the truth. Dragons were not monsters. Humans were capable of courage, mercy, and heroism beyond expectation. And one human had shown it in the most dangerous place possible. Deep space, with only his heart and his choices to guide him. Though Arlen was gone, his actions left a mark deeper than any law, deeper than any battle. His sacrifice became a legend among humans and dragons alike. Every dragon born afterward learned the name of the human who saved their species from extinction. In time, stars that had once seemed cold and distant now felt different to those who remembered the story. They were witnesses to mercy, courage, and the truth that life itself was the greatest power of all. And somewhere, deep in the memories of dragons who had once cried for their dying mother, the name Arlen Voss echoed, a story told again and again. The human who risked everything, who refused to leave when leaving was easier, who made a choice no one else would, had changed the galaxy forever. The council chambers remained tense for weeks, but slowly understanding spread. Diplomats, hunters, and even warships were called to reconsider old grudges. Every system remembered that one small human had stood for life, and dragons had answered with trust and loyalty. The galaxy could no longer ignore the lesson. Mercy could shake stars and courage could change worlds. Sarinthra looked at her babies, now strong and growing, and whispered, "He gave us a chance. We will honor him. We will teach every generation." The babies chirped, flapping their tiny wings in agreement, ready to carry the story forward. The galaxy had learned the truth. And though Arlen Voss had died, His legend lived on in every heartbeat of dragons and every act of courage inspired by one human who chose life when the world demanded fear. Sarinthra and her baby soared through space, gliding past glowing nebulae and silent asteroid fields. The galaxy felt different now. It was alive with possibilities. Where once there had been fear, now there was understanding. Where once humans had been seen only as fragile and self-centered, now they were remembered as brave and merciful. The babies flapped their tiny wings, chirping and racing each other through pockets of starlight. Sarinthra watched them with quiet pride. She remembered the human who had saved her and her children, the one who had stood between them and death. Arlen Voss. His name had become more than a word, it was a promise, a symbol, a lesson to carry forward. She led her family to a distant, uncharted world, one untouched by humans, one where dragons could be free. The planet was green with forests, rivers and mountains reaching into the clouds. It was quiet, peaceful, a place where the babies could grow without fear. Sarinthra landed carefully near a wide river, the water sparkling under the twin suns. The babies chirped and hopped from rock to rock, testing their wings, splashing in the water and exploring every corner of their new home. Sarinthra observed, ensuring they were safe and learning the ways of the world around them. She remembered Arlen's gentle touch, his patient voice, his courage. She wanted her children to know him not as a stranger, but as a guardian, a friend, a legend. She began teaching them about the galaxy, the creatures in it, and the humans who lived among the stars. Humans are strong, she said softly. Not just in body but in heart. One human gave us life when the world wanted us dead. His courage saved us. Remember him always. The babies chirped again, flapping their wings with excitement. Their voices carried across the forest, echoing off mountains and through trees. Even as they played, their minds held the lessons Sarinthra spoke. Every flight, every practice of fire and flight, carried the memory of the human who had risked everything. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, humans were learning too. Reports of dragons working with humans spread through star systems. Pilots spoke of dragons guiding ships safely through asteroid fields, warning of dangers, or delivering messages across systems where no ship dared to go. The memory of Arlen Voss inspired many. They learned that life was worth protecting, that mercy was not weakness, and that courage could take forms no weapon could match. The Galactic Council revised laws and created safe zones for dragons. Hunting them was no longer allowed. Humans who had once feared dragons learned to respect them. Dragons, in turn, remembered the human who had helped them survive. They formed bonds with humans across the galaxy, trust born from one act of heroism. On the uncharted world, Sarinthra taught the babies to fly higher and faster. You are strong, but remember what true strength is, she said. It is not power or fire. It is mercy. It is courage when the world is afraid. It is standing for life even when it is dangerous. The babies flapped harder, soaring above the forests, learning to navigate winds, dodge mountains and glide with grace. Each flap carried the memory of Arlen Voss. Even as they grew, his name echoed in their hearts, a guiding light for every choice they would make. One day, Sarinthra and the babies flew together to the highest peak on the planet. They looked out across the forests, rivers and mountains and she spoke softly. This is your world to protect, your sky to explore. But remember, one human showed us how important life is. You must carry his lesson and teach it to others. The babies nodded, chirping in agreement. They had learned more than flying or hunting. They had learned memory, honor, and gratitude. They would tell their children and their children's children about the human who had saved them. Over time, the world became a sanctuary for dragons. Families grew and they lived freely, exploring forests, rivers, and skies. They flew to distant systems to warn others of danger, to help humans when needed, and to keep the memory of Arlen Voss alive. The stories of the small human who risked everything were told again and again, whispered in caves, shouted across mountains, and carried in songs of dragons flying through the night. In human space, pilots looked to the skies and sometimes saw dragons circling peacefully, guiding ships or protecting travelers. They remembered the stories and many honored Arlen Voss by acting with courage and mercy in their own lives. One human could not save the galaxy alone, but his actions changed the way humans and dragons saw each other forever. Sarinthra watched her babies, now strong and agile, as they practiced diving through clouds and skimming the river's surface. She felt a sense of peace she had never known. The memory of Arlen's sacrifice gave her strength and hope. The galaxy had learned from humans and dragons had learned from humans, and life continued stronger than before. At night, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of red and gold, the mother dragon and her children rested together. The babies nestled against her, sleepy and full of life. Sarinthra whispered their lessons one last time before sleep. Remember courage. Remember mercy. Remember Arlen Voss. He gave us a chance and we will carry it forever. The babies closed their eyes, their minds filled with the story of the human who had changed their lives. Even as stars shone far above, distant and silent, one small human's legacy shone brightly across the galaxy. And somewhere, in every dragon heart and every human who learned the story, the name Arlen Voss lived on, remembered as the one who taught the galaxy what true courage and mercy meant. Dragons and humans alike knew that life was precious, that bravery was not always loud, and that one small choice could change the stars themselves. Sarinthra looked to the skies, her children beside her, and felt peace. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely, and the human who had saved her family would never be forgotten.